Welcome to Fated Evidence, unraveling the past one clue at a time, with your host, retired detective captain and private investigator, Vince Wallace.
Hello and welcome to Fated Evidence. I'm Vince Wallace. Today we want to present a cold case homicide from the year 2000. The case and investigation into the death of Jeanette Charlie Atwater. At approximately 3:30 hours on the morning of January 16th, 2000, the Yellowstone County Sheriff's Office in Billings, Montana received a call of a vehicle fire in a small pullout area off of Bench Boulevard, not far from what is now the First Interstate Bank Arena, or at the time it was called the Metra. Upon the deputies' arrival, they found a vehicle fully engulfed in one set of footprints leading away from the driver's side of the car. Firefighters arrived on scene and, upon extinguishing the fire, located a body inside the trunk. The body was later identified as that of Jeanette Charlie Atwater, a 34-year-old single mother of three who had just celebrated her 34th birthday just days prior. The ensuing investigation found that the previous evening and early morning hours, Jeanette had attended a Napa Auto Store party with several of her co-workers at a few local establishments. She was last seen at a local bar called the Players Club, where she was observed drinking, dancing, and enjoying the evening. Detectives learned that at around 0300 hours, an unknown male had pulled up to a nearby Cenex gas station and pumped $1 of gasoline, entered the store and paid before grabbing a book of matches as he left. He was driving a small compact car, dark in color with a possible orange stripe on the side. The Players Club and Cenex gas station are both located within a very short distance of where the burned vehicle was located. Still photographs of the suspect from the convenience store and a composite drawing of the possible suspect vehicle have been released. The images are available on our website, YellowstoneColdCase.com. Click on the Jeanette Atwater case to view the YouTube video for further details. To date, the case is still open and actively being investigated. Today, we are joined by two members of the cold case unit, Monty Wallace and Scott Goodwin. Both have worked this case, and we're hoping for any tips that may help solve this case. They are here today to talk a bit about the case and what you can do to help. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. Hi, Kim.
Appreciate you being here. Yeah, so the Atwater case, 2000, literally, 25 years ago last week, maybe?
Yep. Yes.
So we're right there at that point where, there's a little bit of an anniversary to this, 25 years. That's a long time.
Yeah.
So I wanted to, kind of get some broad strokes from you guys on the case, and obviously, any tips that anybody can provide or any information would be helpful to this case for sure. Can you kind of give us an overview of the case and what's going on with it?
Well, I think this is an unusual case in a couple of ways. First of all, this haunts me, and I think it haunts all of us because of the way this young woman was killed. To place somebody into a car and set that car on fire is not your usual homicide that you find in Billings, Montana, or even anywhere across the country. It does happen, but it's so rare that it makes this case really unusual. So that aspect alone, I think, brings a real urgency to this case. If this person has the guts and the lack of morality to do this to a beautiful young lady like Jeanette Atwater, it certainly shows that there's no humanity in the person that did this. Right. So I think it's important to solve this case, and we would greatly appreciate anybody's input if they have information that would help us find the killer.
Right. And just to clarify, it is actively being looked at
every day.
Yes.
Yeah, I know that.
My priority case.
I was in there earlier this week, I think, or last week, and we talked about this. So, are leads or tips helping in this case, or is it?
Yeah, I would say so, and we get tips on cases all the time. There are times when somebody will bring us a tip, and they're so certain that a particular individual did this crime that they just won't let go of it. And we certainly investigate every one of these cases and every tip that comes in. And when we find that that a tip isn't credible, then we have to push it off to the side. That doesn't mean we won't listen to the people that brought us that tip, but it's certainly we move on to something else.
Yeah.
So we do end up with that particular situation, but tips are always welcome. And we have a answering service. We have a phone line. People can call in any hour of the day or night, leave us a message. We will follow up and return the call.
Right.
Can I give that phone number, Captain, just for your audience?
I was just looking for that.
Area code 406-254-7988.
Perfect. Yep. I was just looking for that as you did that. Yeah, I think it's important that as tips come in, regardless of, what the information is, that you kind of have to look at it for sure. I mean, even, there's lots of times you'll get tips on something and you've already looked at it and it's, been
investigated.
It's been investigated. So that does happen frequently. And, that is part of it. The more, the better.
Sure.
So, Scott, did you have anything to add to that, or?
Well, I mean, there's so much on this case. When you and the sheriff and Monty started this unit in December of 2011, 9 cases were chosen, and this is one of the most dramatic. This is a terrible. All murders are terrible, but this is a particularly heinous crime.
Right.
The manner of death. A very delightful young woman, 3 children. She had just, to show the heart and the kindness of this woman, she had just donated a kidney to her uncle in November, just previous to her death. She was recuperating. She was a hardworking 34-year-old mother of 3, who had actually, just kind of interest, she had worked several, as a lot of us have done in our lives, who worked several different jobs, bartending a few hours here, so on and so forth. And she was very proud of herself. She had just relatively recently started a new job at the Napa Auto Parts Distribution Company. And she had already made great strides, made new friends. Management had good thoughts and feelings on her, and she was particularly proud of the fact that she was now receiving benefits. And, then this happened. It's just a terrible, terrible murder. She did nothing wrong. And to have this happen was just really awful.
Right.
It offends us.
It does. One thing we can rule out in this particular case is the money aspect. Certainly that can pay or play a part of most crimes, but in this particular case, this woman didn't have a lot. She lived a very Spartan life.
Right.
She didn't drive brand new cars. She didn't spend money on a lot of things that other people do. She was just a hardworking young lady trying to raise a family.
Usually the nexus in a lot of these, I mean, that we see is a couple things that we've always talked about: sex, money, and drugs.
Yep.
And, that's kind of what, the nexus is with one of those 3, or sometimes a couple of those.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
this is kind of a broad question to you guys, but when you guys, approach reviewing old suspects and persons of interest as new information comes in, I mean, how do you go about that? Why were you guys doing that? When, you get, obviously there's, people of interest that are in every case. That's just a known thing. But as new tips come in and new information comes in, does that make you take a deeper look at those people?
Certainly. You take a look at the timeline on the crime as best you can. When a new tip comes in that actually names a suspect or a person that we should look at, we take a look at the criminal history, see if there is one on that particular person. We take a look at their past history of employment, where they were at the particular time of the crime, try to place them in our community at the time. That's pretty much the first step that we go through. And after we've got that information and still have an interest in that person, we talk to them.
Right.
And phone calls are made. We make arrangements to come into the sheriff's office for an interview, and basically talk to them and ask them about the victim and the crime.
As we'd mentioned earlier, a lot of that stuff is some some stuff that's already been covered, and they've already been, vetted for those things. So you kind of have to take it info by info, basically.
Yes.
And here's a perfect case. Sorry, Captain. Here's a perfect case of both whether a tip came in on a person of interest, or more than likely where we just begin at page 1, which we've talked about in a previous case on your podcast, where we start with page 1 and read it, contemporaneously taking our notes, looking at the evidence, and then starting over again and repeating the process and conversing with detectives, talking amongst ourselves, trying to figure this out, trying to go where the evidence takes us as opposed to getting off on tangents.
Right.
This is a case I think that would be a catch-all. It has every part of it in this particular case.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's an element of sophistication on this offender's part where he or she knows that fire is going to more than likely destroy evidence. He or she knows that there's an element of water that the fire department is going to tamp the fire, and that is possibly or probably going to destroy evidence. So there is an element there of a criminal cunning, right?
Right.
We also have what is, we think, one of, if not the most important part of cold case investigation, is establishing a credible, serious timeline.
Right.
And this case is very precise in our timeline. And I don't know how deep you want us to go or not go, but where we have our victim, and this is all public record, out dancing. It had started with a Napa Auto Parts company party at bowling. And then it led into, on Saturday night, January 15th, 2000, into all the folks ending up having a wonderful time up at the old Players Club, which is no more, up in the Heights. And we can, and nothing untowards happened, and there was not extreme drunkenness or anything like that. We know that for a fact. And she is last seen at approximately 1:50 a.m. And then her body is found at 3:30. So you've got a very tight timeline. And it's we are, I would say, diligently, or as hard as we can, working this case to this day. Right now, it's a top priority with Sheriff Linder.
I know that some of the things you mentioned there kind of goes into my next question about primary challenges that have hindered maybe solving this case. And obviously, the car was burned by the suspect for a reason. I mean, that's not going to be anything, people can't realize on their own. And that does make some challenges. I mean, it doesn't make it impossible by any means, but this is, this is where detective work comes in, and in, that type of realm as to, find out in totality what clues and information we do have.
Well, fire and water do destroy evidence, no question about it. And it makes the job a lot harder. It doesn't make it impossible, however.
Right.
You still have, in this particular case, a body. You have clothing that wasn't totally destroyed in the fire. You have other things that you can use to garner clues and evidence, and
Right.
we certainly have done that in this particular case. The car itself was pretty much completely destroyed in the fire.
Yeah.
And the efforts to put out the fire probably took away a lot of evidence that would have even still remained after the fire. But it was the combination of the two that made the scene of the crime tough to analyze.
Yeah. Putting everything together, all the pieces together are still there. So,
Yep.
So, I mean, timeline wise, I know that you talked about it, Scott, a good timeline on what's going on here. We talked briefly in the beginning, a little bit about the time frame of, the gas and the car being found and such. Is there any gaps in the timeline that we're missing, or are we all pretty good?
Well, there are things that, and again, I tend to run a little roughshod, so I've got to control myself here as to what I let out or say. But we can clearly prove she was alive.
Just broad strokes.
Yeah, at approximately 10 minutes of 2, early morning hours now of Sunday, January 16th at the Players Club. And interestingly, she just seemingly disappeared. In other words, all the people that she was with, all the coworkers that were friends with her, again, no fights that night, nothing untowards happened that night. Everyone had a fun time dancing at the Players Club, and they were all kind of milling around the door and going out into the parking lot. And after all of the efforts of the Yellowstone County Sheriff's Office, no one has ever been able to say that they saw her leaving in her Oldsmobile Cutlass Sierra. She was gone. And the next thing we know, as you can see on our website, we have a person of interest that comes in at 3:09 a.m. at the Cenex gas station. We have what I guess you would call CCTV, kind of old DVR photos and video of this person. If anybody could take a look at that and reach out to us, we'd sure want to know. There's a vehicle described. It's kind of a possible hatchback compact car, perhaps brown in color with an orange, kind of a pumpkin orange stripe on the side. Very interested if we could possibly identify that person and speak with them. And that was at 3:09. And then virtually right across the street at the cutout at Bench and Lincoln, deputies got a call from passerbys who found a vehicle on fire. They went to a neighboring house, used the phone, called it in, and deputies were on scene there precisely at 3:30 a.m. So all this happens, if you will, from 1:50. This is all out there, public record we can prove. At 1:50 a.m., somehow leaving the Players Club. The call comes in at 3:30, and then unfortunately, they find her body in the trunk of her vehicle at Bench and Lincoln.
Right.
Those are all facts. That's all provable. It's that very short delta of time we cannot prove right now.
Yeah.
What happened?
Yeah, very true. Timelines are so interesting and important in all homicides, but especially cold case homicides. And when you start looking back, it's important for, the initial responding officers, deputies, or whatever to get the necessary information in the beginning to help establish that. And that's where your investigators come in and swoop in and try to nail that down as minute as possible in a timeline. It's just that important. Victimology is a huge deal in cold case investigations for sure.
Yes, and I want to further on that. They did immediately kind of figure out, let me go back to the vehicle itself. And this is terrible stuff, and I hate to talk about it, but they couldn't get the flames extinguished, and it kept flaring up. So when they then realized it's coming from the trunk is when they then realized, unfortunately, that Charlie was there.
Right.
Then it immediately changed to a homicide. And again, remember, this is at 3:30 on a Sunday morning, but they immediately called out. Everybody got involved. They immediately did a search of the surrounding area, even figured out, to their great credit, deputies and detectives, that, let's go to these adjoining gasoline stations. And sure enough, they hit a home run in my mind, and they went to that Cenex and they began the interview process. And they developed really, really, really good information, including this, what I guess you would call a person of interest that we'd love to identify or speak to, that came in at 03:09 precisely. We've got that from the logs on the video, and he was in there for a very, very short amount of time, less than a minute, and that was kind of the beginning, if you will. And it's been the real mystery based on the things that we do have. We have a identified as a male white mid-30s, 5'9", 150 pounds, brownish hair with kind of an odd hairstyle, but very importantly to us, a very noticeably pockmarked acne scars on both of his cheeks. And that began what has become now, 25 years of us looking to identify this person or have anyone who had contact with this person that could identify him to us.
Yep.
Well, a couple of things fit in this particular case. Number one, an accelerant was used to start that fire and to keep it burning. It was a hot fire.
Right.
When fire officials arrived, they had trouble controlling that fire. And we know that was part of this crime. Tie that into this person, whoever that might be, going to the Cenex station and getting $1 worth of gas. That's your accelerant right there. So those two things really fit together and have been part of the original investigation since the first day. One of the things that makes this case so special is that fire and the fact that that's not the usual way of disposing of a body. It was so unusual that the national media came to Billings. America's Most Wanted did a full half-hour show on this particular crime, thinking that this was a person from out of town, somebody that might have been passing through, and that somebody nationwide might be able to recognize that person. You know, there were some tips that were developed out of that, but not a great number. But it shows the extent to which the agency has gone to try to solve the case.
Yeah, I know that, when I was doing some interviews on this case, that the research I had done, I mean, there are some of these incidents that happen around the country, but I mean, there was the suspects that were, identified in those cases definitely did not fit, in ours. So, that is one thing that's, very important is, that cases get entered into VICAP and that. So, there's a resource there for everybody to bounce cases off of, and information and in similarities and complexities that are, unique to each case. So
I would also throw out there that we've discussed the Bernhardt case on your podcast, which had an element in there in terms of ice being used in the element of the crime.
Correct.
And the VICAP search and the other searches, your law enforcement databases that you guys have done, it's the same with this, where how many times, et cetera, person in a trunk set a fire. There actually, shockingly to me, there were not that many cases.
No.
It's not common. It's not as common as you would think, which is an element of this crime that's huge for us. Another couple of things. The vehicle, which was again described as a compact hatchback, and you and Monty have spent a lot of time on every kind of, Datsun and Pinto and Chevette and Rabbit and every kind of hatchback identified. We thought that we would immediately have a vehicle identified. That's a huge element of this case. The other thing I would say is that remember that there are two circles here, if you will. There are the group of fellow Napa Auto Parts employees that were with her that night, up to and including the Players Club. As eyewitnesses, there is also an element of all of the bouncers, bartenders, and cocktail servers at the Players Club to try to paint a picture, not just us guessing, but a picture from eyewitnesses. What happened that night? Was there an incident? Were there incidents, plural? Was there a fight? Or, any number of things that happen, on nights out at clubs. And we have a very, very, we think, good picture of who Jeanette was with, what happened, what didn't happen. And it's one of the elements of why cases go cold is that when I used the word disappeared at the beginning, I wasn't being funny or dramatic, but she just was seen with a a group of folks that she had been with all day and all night. And they're clustered by that front door, and all of a sudden she's just not there. And we can only, which we try not to do, but surmise, because she was found in her Oldsmobile, that was the vehicle that was set on fire, that somehow, some way, she went from point A to point B. And those are the things that I think it's fair to say that we're looking at, working on more than anything.
Yeah, that makes sense. Absolutely. How can the public help solve this case? I know you guys, here to encourage tips and new information. How can they help?
Well, we have a website that you can see a video and get information on the particular case. It's YellowstoneColdCase.com. And if you go to that website and click on Atwater, the Atwater file, a YouTube video will appear, and you can watch the actual video done by Lynn Turner Fitzgerald that talks about the circumstances of the case. If that rings any bells, if that brings back any information to you, please give us a call. We're at the office. We're happy to take your call. If we're not there, leave us a message. We'll get back to you. But we'd like to hear what you have to say. We're always open to new ideas, new clues. And if you have information that you feel would help bring closure to this case, we welcome your call.
Go ahead.
We'd also want to throw out, too, that as we've discussed in the other podcast, other case, that things change in 25 years. Marriages change, relationships change, people's, not being dramatic, but people's souls change. They become a changed person. And who they were perhaps in January of 2000 may not be who they are today, meaning that they should feel free to reach out to the sheriff's office and give us any thoughts you have, any ideas you have. Frankly, we could use more information, particularly to try to make contact with the person that came in the Cenex store, but anybody, anything related to the vehicle, if you think you know that vehicle, if you were perhaps in the Players Club that night, if you knew Charlie, if you have any ideas on this, we would love to hear from you. There's nothing too embarrassing. Many times we've talked to folks that they go, well, we were going to call you, but we felt a little silly or stupid or whatever. That shouldn't hold you back from reaching out. Again, this is all murders are terrible. Every case we've got is awful, particularly to loved ones, to family members. This is a particularly heinous thing. We have spoken to some of her children and siblings, and they're heartbroken. This is a terrible situation. And you and Monty and Sheriff Linder and Captain Dan Paris and everybody else there, we want to solve this case.
And if you'd like to remain confidential, if you want your information to remain confidential, that's fine. Just let us know. We will keep that information confidential, but we'd just like to hear from you.
I was going to add that on there. Any tip is always welcome. And the one thing I always try to tell people is, it might seem very, insignificant to you, but it could be a game changer for a case or a piece of information that we're looking for, or, who knows, but every little bit is welcome. I mean, it could be a big deal to us.
No detail is too small.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, and that was actually the very end of what I had here. Can a caller remain anonymous? And obviously they can.
Yes.
Did you want to give out that phone number again?
Sure. That's area code 406-254-7988. That's a cold case unit at the Yellowstone County Sheriff's Office. The other thing I just want to, again, kind of reiterate, and we don't want, of course, we don't want people for personal vendettas to be calling in, giving false information. You certainly don't want to do that. But I can't tell you how many times, both in our cases and in other cases that we've studied, where someone says, geez, I always thought about old Bob, Joe, Sam, Charlie, but they feel a little squeamish or for whatever reason. we encourage you to reach out for us. We encourage you to reach out for us. Was this a local person? Was this a person passing through? What is the motive behind this case? Why sounds silly, but why did this happen to this very decent young mother of three? Again, we've talked to some of the children and sisters and family members and so forth, and they've been highly cooperative, very helpful, and we attempt to do this on every one of our 9 cases. But we highly encourage anybody listening to this, if they know anything, to reach out and let us know.
And this is one case where family members have been helpful. They provided us with information. They provided pictures, photos, things that we've been able to use to help trace down clues. So family members are a big part of what we look at also during these investigations, and they certainly have information in most every case that can be very helpful.
Yeah, very, very good point. I mean, I remember speaking to some of the family on this case years ago, and you kind of get mixed reactions, not in this case, but in any cold cases. A lot of them don't want the hurt brought back up. And, others are, gung-ho right there, let's get a resolution to this. So.
Now that is an unusual part of what we do. And some family members don't want any part of the investigation. They don't want to know about what's going on. They don't want to be contacted. And others are 180 degrees the other direction. They want to know what's happening. They call on a regular basis. Yep. They send information when they can. So whatever they have, we will take and be grateful.
The other thing that's kind of a sad part of this is a lot of the family passes away while this is still unresolved. Yes. And, I don't like to see that. And we've had that happen. We had that happen in Bernhardt. Yeah. We've had, here's this case. There's a lot of these cases we have just because of the sheer amount of time that has passed. Yep. Without resolution to them, that's the family passes on in there. Yeah.
And unfortunate, but it does occur.
Yeah.
And same with people that were family, friends, witnesses. We don't live forever, unfortunately, and people do pass away before they're able to help us or provide information that might help us.
Right. And, just a clarification for everybody on the topic of cold cases. Here again, everybody's keeping up on technology, what can and can't be done at the current time. The other thing is evidence is continuously reevaluated. It's continuously reevaluated for what will work and what, with technology that we do have now. I don't know if you guys want to add in anything to that, but that is a big part of work in these cases too.
Certainly, we start from the beginning a lot, and we go back and we review case information, and we constantly reevaluate evidence to see if there's something that might help us, something we might have missed, something that we didn't find previously. All of that part of what we do.
Right. Yeah, Scott.
And how they're doing what they do, meaning the things that we thought were crazy 10 years ago is now commonplace.
Right.
And what's going to be happening in the future. Today we would go, well, you can't do that. Well, yeah, they can. They will. Things change in life. Things change in cold case investigation. So it's, we don't want to sit there and just, we're going to wait forever. We're not doing that. We're being as aggressive as we can be. And this agency has a lot of great, young, sharp, hard-charging detectives, which is exciting to see. Somehow, some way, there's something, the way we feel, what motivates us is that, hey, we may be missing something here. So we're going to continuously look at what we've got to work with. And again, without being too specific and talking about things we shouldn't talk about, we're excited by some of the information that we do have and where we're going with it on this case.
It's interesting that in today's environment, homicide cases are normally solved rather quickly. In the case of Yellowstone County Sheriff's Office, Billings Police Department, their record of solving these cases quickly is excellent. Most cases are solved within a week, a month, a year. And that's really great because things have changed. Cellular telephones, a big part of that, cameras, the witnesses being available, all of that. A lot of those things we don't have to use in cold cases. But today, to get away with a homicide, a much more difficult situation.
I know a bit ago you both had kind of mentioned your, I guess, investment in this case or your feelings on this case. I don't mean to put you on the spot at all, but you kind of alluded to it being, maybe, I don't know, some personal investment into it or something like that. Is that because of the type of crime that was committed here? Not just the homicide, but how it occurred or the age of the victim, or does that play a role? I know we all, when it came to the Bernhardt case, felt very strongly about that case. I mean, That was such I mean, I can't even describe the way, that made me feel. You got two 24-year-old kids.
Yes.
Here's a 34-year-old woman and a mother, a single mom.
3 children.
3 children. I mean, talk to me.
Nobody deserves to die this way. Nobody deserves to be killed. And to be burned in a vehicle after a Christmas party just doesn't make any sense to me.
Right.
Whoever did this is a lousy human being and deserves to get whatever they have coming. This is the type of case that I think we get invested in because it should never have happened. This young lady should not have died. She should not have died this way.
No. And there's a couple of great points in here. One of the difficulties with cold case investigation in my 13 years over there is that it's just human nature for us to look for a reasonable explanation of an unreasonable action.
Right.
That was an unreasonable thing to do, whoever this suspect is. So we're looking for a reasonable action. You can't do that. Yeah. You can't define why somebody did what they did, especially when it's this heinous. But that's just human nature that we have to try to check each other on. Don't do that. Let's look at the evidence. The evidence is going to take us where we need to go, not trying to find I'll say it again, a reasonable explanation for an unreasonable action. And the other thing with that is that this wonderful author, Michael Connolly, created the Harry Bosch character, where everybody counts or nobody counts. Well, this, I'll just keep saying it, this is a very lovely 34-year-old woman, didn't do anything wrong, 3 children that loved her, had donated a kidney, for God's sake. And then her entire future, her life is extinguished, quite literally. And I think anybody involved in these things just has a basic nature of, I want you to be held accountable for what you did.
Right.
That's just really when it comes down to basic humanity. We all want to be held accountable for what we do, good or bad. And there is nobody more motivated, I guess I would say, Captain, than the people over there who want to catch this guy.
Yeah, that was kind of where I was headed with this is, that is a lot of the motivation. I mean, for us to keep doing what we're doing, for the families, justice, I mean, everything, all of it.
Well, one of the things, the good and bad that we get exposed to, we can look at the files, we can look at the photos, we can examine the evidence, and we get up close to it and personal, and we really see what the crime really was and the extent of brutality and the extent of suffering that is involved in many of these cases is just inexcusable. And for that to happen within our community is just not right. So that's one of the things that keeps us going, is that we see what's happened, we see what a horrific situation it was in this case and others, and that just shouldn't be happening in our community.
Obviously, there's some rewarding parts to working these kind of cases. I mean, what are your guys' thoughts on that? What besides the things we've talked about keeps you motivated, and what is your prize at the end, so to speak, or your
I think we're all just proud to be involved in it. We work with some very good people. I work for a great sheriff, a man that has come forward and said, you know what, let's find out what's going on. Let's make a difference. That's great. That's what we like to see. Certainly financially, it's not rewarding. There is no money involved, but there is a feeling that we're able to provide a service to the community that wouldn't be there if we weren't doing what we're doing. We have a volunteer cold case unit. It's made up of people that don't get paid, but are willing to put in hours and time to solve some of these crimes. And that's a good feeling. People are still willing to come forward and help and do good things. And that's one of the things that makes our community great.
Yeah. Scott?
When you think about it, you're doing it for, we're all grandfathers. You're doing it for your grandkids. You're doing it for your children, your sons, your daughters, your friends, your family. We're all, Yellowstone County is a great community.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't care what community it is. There's there's right and there's wrong.
Right.
And this and Linda and Clifford were wrong.
Yeah.
And it makes me personally very angry.
Is there any part of cold case investigations or the process that you wish that the public understood more about? Anything?
Yeah, I think the families in particular would like to see cases solved quickly.
Right.
And it's that time element that really hurts. I know I talked to a family member on another crime recently who every year, once or twice a year, sends a nice letter and says, where are we? Why hasn't this case been solved?
Right.
What can we do? Where are we?
Mm-hmm.
And we try to provide them as much information as we can. I think the thing we'd like to say to these families and to the friends of the victims is that we're not going to give up. We're here to work the cases. We'll continue to work them as long as we can, and we'll try to come up with the answers they need. But cold cases take time, and we're dealing with evidence that in many cases decades old. We're dealing with witnesses that can or can't be found. It's a time-consuming proposition. DNA, as great as it is, takes time to process.
And there's limitations.
And there are limitations.
One of the things I want to throw out there is that, in looking at these cases, which I've been through all of them, obviously,
Right.
They have been well investigated from the beginning. I don't think that really we've run across a case yet that has not been well investigated. The detectives back, when these cases came up and then were, fresh, they used what they had at the time. And I just, when I look back, they were well investigated. A lot of the work has already been done. It's waiting for new tips. It's, waiting for changes in technology and things like that.
Yes. And the thing I would piggyback on what Monty said is that it's not like television. This isn't a television show.
Doesn't get solved in an hour?
No, it does not get solved.
Not a week or a year even sometimes.
No. So go back to Bernhardt. That homicide was 1973. Sheriff and you and everybody made the announcement in March of 2019.
Yeah, that was a daily worked case for sure for years.
This case is 25 years. We have cases from 1978, 1995. And there's, again, it's kind of this passing of the torch. Some of us are getting older here. And while we do it, for as long as we can do it, we want to do
yourself.
it. We've got to be able to have younger people learn about this, take this on. But as you guys have made clear, you commanded the unit.
Right.
Monty's was a reserve deputy and has been there 30 years. Their workload is overwhelming. I don't think people understand, just whatever size agency it is, how many cases officers and deputies have. It's very, very, so there are a lot of strikes against you to get started with that you have to overcome.
Right.
But we started with 9 on December of 2011 when the unit started, and 2 have been openly solved.
Right.
The Miranda Fenner case in Laurel, the video store, and Clifford and Linda Bernhardt. The remaining cases, we are just all I would say, just as an opinion, is that we're trying as hard as we can on everything else. We have everything at our disposal that we can use. The last thing I would say again is everyone is seeing this on television and then in the media. Thank God for investigative genetic genealogy. And we have had great success, and there are wonderful labs. It's not just Parabon, but we have had specific success with Parabon Nanolabs and CC Moore and her people, Christine Green specifically on Bernhardt. Got other great analysts under CC's command.
Misty?
Well, I didn't, yes.
You can say.
Okay. I want Misty Gillis, who's a magnificent analyst who is helping us on a case.
And she's been responsible for solving a major case in the United States also.
Yep.
That,
Boy in the box.
that we can talk about in another show. But she's a great person, a great talent.
Yeah, love it. I mean, this is where the collaboration comes in knowing your resources and having those kind of relationships where, CC calls up or Misty calls up or Christine, whoever, and says, hey, this is where we're at. It's important to have those and to be able to tap that knowledge if you need it for questions and stuff on cases. So,
yes.
So,
yes.
Well, one point you made too, Scott, about the workload in law enforcement, I think is really important. One of the reasons why cases get pushed off to the side is that there's a constant input of cases in every department, every sheriff's office in the country.
inflow. Yeah.
The inflow of cases, new cases, whether they're homicides, burglaries, sexual assault cases,
Constant.
arsons, it's a constant flow. In our particular office, a detective probably has 40 cases they're working at any one time.
40, 50, 60, yeah.
It's true, and it varies by time of the year, and it varies by a lot of other factors. So they're working those cases hard, and it's up to the cold case unit to squeeze in time on their schedules to present new information that they can investigate, that they can bring forward that might help solve some of these cases. So it's a combination of effort. It's the volunteers, it's the cold case unit working directly with the detective captain and lieutenant and with the detectives to bring forward the new information that we develop. That's really what we do. We're a research organization that provides information, new information on cases.
Well, it goes a little deeper than that. I mean, I know when I was running the unit, you guys were pretty invaluable in a lot of different respects, and not just information gathering and that, but I mean, there was active roles and interviews and all sorts of stuff.
Well, we were traffic cops. You're a traffic cop, meaning you're trying to segregate information that is really of value to not bother deputies or detectives with frivolous things. So we're trying to traffic cop the information. The other thing I would say that, again, I don't think your average listener out there understands is that with monetary issues, budget constraints, officers, patrol officers, and deputies have become quasi-detectives that 30 or 40 years ago they weren't.
Yeah.
They are inundated with follow-up on cases. They are they're charged with the responsibility of helping close cases. It's everything is different today, and a lot of that is monetary, is budget constraints.
Right.
Well, a good point, I think, is that the patrol officers are normally the first people on the scene of many of these cases. They establish a perimeter. They make sure evidence isn't tampered with. They seal off the scene. They make sure that people that might have witnessed it are there.
Take statements.
They take statements.
Photographs.
So really it's that combination of patrol, detectives, cold case unit, everybody gets involved in these cases to make it happen.
It's a collaborative effort with a lot of people, but it does start at the patrol level. All of these cases do. You don't see detectives responding as first responders. It starts with patrol.
Right.
So yeah.
And one of the things we always tell them is, and a lot of these people are brand new. They're young people. They haven't had much law enforcement experience, but when they come in and they're brought through the detective division on their first day to talk to each of us, and the advice we always give them is, boy, I'll tell you, evidence collection is the most important thing you can do.
Yeah.
Be diligent, be careful.
Photographs,
everything you can do will add up over the years to solve these cases.
Very true. Very true. Well, I know we've mentioned a lot of people that have had a part in this. One we haven't mentioned is Sandy.
Yes.
Yeah, we have a data analyst type person that does all of our data entry and work for us, and that's Sandy Kemp. A great lady. She's been with us for many, many years. She's invaluable. She brings us new ideas and brings a new perspective, a woman's perspective, to a lot of the things we look at.
She donates a lot of money to the.
She has single-handedly donated thousands of dollars for DNA testing and genetic genealogy that has helped us solve cases, and we greatly appreciate Sandy's expertise and her help that she's provided.
Yeah,
and has spent 30 years or so again on the law enforcement side.
Yeah, she did.
Between county attorneys, district attorneys, Wolf Point sheriffs. I mean, she's
Billings Police. I mean,
yeah,
all over.
She's done it all. Been a dispatcher.
Yeah.
She's done a lot of things and continues
yeah.
to do a lot of things to help.
Valuable person.
So much so. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah. And obviously we've talked about the sheriff being the founder of the unit and his continued involvement and support, which really helps. It's you got to have that for this to work.
It was just this week. I went into his office and said, "Sheriff, do you have a minute? Can we bring you into the cold case office?" And within about 2 minutes, he was in there talking with us about a particular case and other things, and that's valuable to have his help and his expertise and his support. Means the world to us.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys have any parting words at this point?
I would just reiterate YellowstoneColdCase.com for any of your listeners to go on there, try to check out the videos, try to check out our information on this case. We would very much love to hear from them regarding the car and that person in the Cenex store.
And we do take donations for DNA testing. If any individual would like to donate, it does help us to be able to facilitate the testing, because a lot of what we do is done through private testing labs, and genealogy is also something that doesn't come for free. So anybody that would like to donate, we're more than happy to talk to you. It is tax deductible, and we greatly appreciate your support.
We send a lot of evidence to private labs just because of turnaround time issues and availability. So, and then there's some things that the state lab just can't do. So that is the reason behind us using private labs at points in time.
And it would be nice if the state would better support our state crime lab. I think they're undermanned, they're under budgeted, and certainly could do a lot more if they had the resources. So it would be good to see some funding go their direction also.
Anything else, gentlemen, before we end this?
Thanks for doing this.
Yep.
Yeah. Appreciate you guys coming in, and I'm sure we'll have you on future episodes. There's a lot of still questions that, people have as far as, cold case units and how they operate and some specifics to that. So we'll probably have you guys back here in the near future for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. If you have any information regarding the Jeanette Atwater homicide, please call the Yellowstone County Cold Case Unit at 406-254-7988. And YellowstoneColdCase.com is the website for further information as well. Thank you. The views and opinions expressed by the guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. Any parties mentioned, in whole or part of an investigation, are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. All opinions given by the host are my own.